But that gap that the huge numbers of fatherless families now have is not being filled by youth workers. It's not being filled by male teachers. And so we're turning, or youngsters are turning to internet influencers. They're perhaps turning to the gang down the street.
How did you come to decide that addressing this extraordinary generational crisis or the set of challenges facing young men, how did you come to decide that was something you wanted to focus on?
Well, the BBC are at the root of this, so...
People often say the BBC are to blame for things. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm going to go a slightly different direction to normal. So I was offered the opportunity to deliver the Dimbleby lecture last year, and you think, great honour, what am I going to talk about? And around the same time, the Lost Boys report came out, which the CSJ had done on where are young men today, and that had a big impact on me reading through it.
That's the Centre for Social Justice, I should say.
Yeah. And then once you start to unpick and research what was going on, I just kept getting flashing lights of issues that boys are facing today. And of course, your immediate thought is, well, hang on a minute, we haven't sorted out what's going on for women and girls. But I think that's been part of the issue, because there's some brilliant work going on creating better opportunities for women. But within all of that, it shouldn't be an either or. And I think in a big way, we've taken our eyes off some of the issues that men face through their lives. And we have to start thinking about how we address those as well as the issues for women and girls. It's complex. And it reminds me a little bit of when I started working with the Football Association, because people would always want a root and branch review, and they'd all have a view on how English football needed to operate to improve the performance of the national team. And they'd all think one thing would make the difference, but it was never one thing. It was improve the academies, it was improve the junior national team experience, it was get better at penalty shootouts, it was stop getting red cards in key games. With this issue, you can see that there are issues in terms of the changing dynamic of families, a lot more fatherless families, which is leading to a gap in terms of male role models in boys' lives. There's the education system where, boys start school on average behind girls. Their vocabulary is lower. It sounds as though boys are read to less in younger age, early stages before they go to school. More boys are, their exam results are behind girls. They're more likely to be excluded from school. So there's behavioural things behind that. I think this speaks to the broad issue of male role models in boys' lives, because if there isn't a male role model at home, that gap used to be perhaps filled by someone else in the family, or a teacher at school, or a youth worker. And where that gap exists now is that there are very few male teachers in schools.
Extraordinary stat in your doc, which is that 1 in 3 primary schools have no male teachers.
Incredible. Boys are then not getting that interaction with men at school. That's not actually to do with the quality of teaching. That's to do with having men in their lives that you how do you learn as a kid? Well, there's what people tell you, but you then role model yourselves on behaviours and interactions that you see your parents have. But that gap that the huge numbers of fatherless families now have is not being filled by youth workers. It's not being filled by male teachers. And so we're turning, or youngsters are turning to internet influencers. They're perhaps turning to the gang down the street. Generally, boys want to be part of a group. Years ago, that might have been the Boy Scouts, or it's the football club, or it's the youth club. And when those groups aren't there, that sense of belonging for some of them comes from being part of the gang. And we've got to try to provide better alternatives for kids. So when we're talking about getting them off computers, well, that's fine, but what are we providing instead?
And if we turn to solutions, one of the big things that you're keen on is expanding the idea and the nature of education, particularly to try and give meaning and hope and joy to people who don't necessarily want to pursue an academic education. Do you think that the provision for non-academic boys and girls is good enough?
I think a lot of it seems to have disappeared. So
Vocational training, apprenticeships, skills.
absolutely. I mean, one of the likely outcomes of Alan Milburn's report looks to be, and I'm hearing this in government reports as well, a push for more apprenticeships. And I think for some reason that has started to become a dirty word. When I was growing up, I think it was the top 5% of kids went to university. So I'm not going to knock university education, certainly not when I'm sitting with you.
No,
but it's not the route for everybody. A lot of employers are looking for work experience. They're looking for that work readiness, as they're called, the rough edges of turning up on time and how you deal with people that so many youngsters learned in hospitality industry or retail industry through Saturday jobs. And a lot of those opportunities seem to have disappeared. So that, alongside more vocational opportunities in schools, woodwork, metalwork, things that used to be apparent. If you're not academically minded as a young boy, and you're always at the bottom of the class, that's not a great feeling. I can remember being reasonable at maths, ending up in the top set and being bottom of it because it was all moving too quickly for me. If I'd been in a lower set at the top of that, I'd have felt hugely different about myself. But on the PE field, I was, I felt $1 million. So people were praising me. So if you're constantly academically at the bottom, but actually the opportunity to create things or to make things is what you're really good at, and you're not getting that validation at school, then again, big hit to self-esteem and confidence, really.
Have you thought about practical things you'd like to see and like to be involved in to try and actually fix this complex, as you say, multifaceted set of challenges?
Yeah, well, again, once you start to unpick things, I'm very conscious it's easy to raise awareness of problems. So we don't necessarily need more and more reports. I mean, I think the Alan Milburn one will be very important, but it's easy to sort of ask for another research report or to take part in another survey, and actually we've got to get on and do some things. And so one of the things I've been delighted about with the team I work with, we've done a lot of work recently with the King's Trust because they've got a mentoring process that works, and we've been able to align with government, we've been able to align with corporate, because funding is always an issue, and there's a power to bringing all those parties together. And what we're looking at is constant feedback from young people has been having the right sort of mentor in their life has often been life-changing. And that might be just to reassure them that actually what you're experiencing is normal. We all go through these things. Or it might be specific to learning in a particular job where years of experience, and that mentor can be somebody 2 years older than them that's just been through what they're going through as well. It doesn't have to be a grey-haired fud like me. So
You're not that great.
Well, that's probably the right time to get out of the job I was in then. But our young boys are an asset. How do we fulfill their potential? How do we get the best out of them, rather than how do we stop them doing all the things that we've talked about? And I've seen how young talent can be developed when you believe in them, when you give them that feeling of confidence, when you allow them to fail. With young people, you've got to give them opportunities. They're going to fall off their bike. They've got to get back on and learn from it.
If I may say, you had a couple of high-profile failures or things not working out as you'd want.
Yeah, but that's part of life's journey, and you learn more through it. And all young people, the one thing that's going to happen in their life for certain is things are going to go wrong. So developing resilience is also important on their journey, and they have to learn that. And I think we're quite critical of the younger generation. I hear them called snowflakes, and that's in part because we're not allowing them the opportunities to go and do things and to fail and learn from them and bounce back. So I think it's very easy for my generation to criticise. We've got to create a better environment for our young people. And as I said earlier, then they have to also step up. It's a dual thing. It can't be that they sit there and just complain about everything. They get one shot in this world. And I had a great coach in Terry Venables who always said, this is not a rehearsal.
This is it.
So go for it in life and do the best you can.
Just had a thought, if you were writing a letter called Dear England, once again, would that be the message of it? How would it be different this time round?
Well, I think some of the things I spoke about then are still a problem. But I definitely think that we need to think about the optimism. And we're still an amazing country with incredible talent. And the reality is, I mean, personally, there's nowhere else I'd rather live in the world. And I'm sure there are people in many, many other countries who'd love to live in our country. So we need to start speaking more positively about what we've got and what we're good at, and less focus on what we're not doing and where we're slipping behind. And, you know, for young people, they want that hope, they want that optimism. They do want to work. They do want to contribute. I think that's very clear from every young person I meet. They need a bit of guidance. You know, they need that arm around the shoulder at certain times, that nudge in the right direction, but then they can flourish.
Talking about an amazing country with great talent and what we're good at, I would get sacked, Gareth, if I didn't ask you about England's prospects in the World Cup, which I feel is wholly inappropriate. But there is a World Cup which happens to be starting next week. How confident should England fans be about England's prospects?
Well, the great thing is that this group of players have now been through so many of the hurdles towards winning that we hadn't been through 8 years ago. Winning knockout matches, winning penalty shootouts, getting to finals. So, you know, they're in the mix. There's an expectation, and an expectation among themselves that they should be in the latter stages of these tournaments now. And, you know, it's still tournament football, so it's unbelievably complex. But you know, we will win a tournament at some point. I'd have loved to have been there for that moment, but I think it was the right moment for me to step away. And now the baton passes on, and, you know, I've become an England fan again.